My name is Chris, Marketing Director for Compliance Group. We want to welcome you to episode 4 of the CSA Revolution series. Some quick introductions, and I'll go ahead and pass it along to Khaled. But we have, thankfully, April Francis from Medtronic with us today. Just a quick overview of her background. She is the IT Director of Quality at Medtronic. She oversees the processes and alignment with regulations and standards used by global IT with Medtronic. Also, she has over 15 years of professional experience in quality supporting IT research development within the medical device and pharmaceutical industries. April, pardon me, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. In the lower left-hand corner of the screen, we apologize for personal reasons. Frankie couldn't be with us today, but we do want to make mention of her as well, the IT manager at Medtronic. She is also part of the FICSA team. I also want to make sure to mention that. Khaled made sure that I mentioned that at the beginning here. So April, Frankie, Khaled are part of the FICSA team as well. But Frankie has over 20 years of experience with clinical research, development, manufacturing expertise, as well as IT experience. In the upper right-hand corner is Mr. Khaled Masali. He is our Executive Vice President with Clients and Regulatory Relations. He has over 25 years of experience. I'll tease you again, Khaled, that makes you probably, what, age 29 at this point. A lot of experience in IT manufacturing quality. Again, he has been instrumental on the FICSA team, which is the FDA-Industry CSA team, with helping to contribute to the FDA Draft Guidance, which is also known as the Computer Software Assurance. We want to welcome you. And then last but certainly not least, Mr. Stephen Cook. He is our VP of Quality and Computer Compliance at Compliance Group. Over 20 years of experience as a systems validation expert. He has a strong partnership between IT, quality, and business to lead creative solutions. That's a mouthful. But having said that, let's get to the meat of today's session. Khaled, I'm going to pass the baton to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chris. Much appreciated. A couple of things I want to mention. Yes, about the age thing, those are highlights. Those are not gray. The other thing I wanted to mention about Frankie, and I'm really thankful for her for initially accepting to, to do the webinar with us, but for her personal reasons, she couldn't. One thing I really want to highlight about Frankie's volunteer activity for various levels of veterans of foreign wars, auxiliary. She's currently serving as actually the National Ambassador and Scholarship Program. So really great work that she's been doing for over the 20 plus years, with the veterans. So I just wanted to highlight that for Frankie. So again, April, thank you so much. You are a lifesaver. You helped us, and I really appreciate you joining us very last minute. So thank you again. All right. Here I'm going to walk you through the agenda today. So again, really, I'm seeing a lot of the attendees. Thank you for those who are actually have been joining us since April 23rd now on a bi-weekly basis. It's been great, and I hope you're really actually learning something from us, and you're applying some of what we're showing you here, introducing you to the FICSA team members who are the folks really behind the recommendation, presented to the FDA. So hopefully the draft guidance that we continue to talk about will be released soon. So again, you're meeting April, who's one of the FICSA team members. We're going to talk a little bit about the cultural barriers, but I'd like to repeat that as a slide. For those of you who's been attending, you've seen it before, but I'd like to show it again because I want everyone to understand why we're doing what we're doing, right? We're going to talk about risk assessment, CSV paper process versus CSA paperless, right? We don't want to just do CSA and sit and say this is it. No, there's a lot more, right? It's a process improvement. We all work in quality. We all work in IT. We all do process improvement. Let's not be afraid to automate. So Stephen is going to walk us through some of that. And then we're going to get to Medtronic automated risk-based process, how they actually implemented CSA and how they actually automated the risk-based approach process. And then we'll talk about a little bit next steps, and we'll open it hopefully for questions, and we'll have enough time for questions this time. Some of the objectives, start thinking immediately, as we're talking right now, start thinking how you want to implement CSA, not if you want to, okay? It's a matter of start. Stop waiting, please. Digitize your current paper CSA process, okay? And that we're gonna talk about it today, both Stephen and April. And then, of course, create awareness to accelerate innovation and realize the value. And trust me, you will only realize the value when you start really applying innovation, right? We're all scared. We don't want to automate. Why? Because it's expensive. Validation is expensive. Well, guess what? This is an opportunity. So let's take it. Finally, no need to wait for the FDA draft guidance to be released. I know many of you are going to ask, when is it going to be released? Is it going to be released? Can I start applying it? Yes, start today. Some of the biggest companies have started 3 years ago implementing CSA. It's all within the regulation. All right? FICSA team, great folks from various medical device, pharma, biotech. You heard me right, not just medical device, pharma, biotech. So that means CSA applies for pharma? Yes, it does. It applies to everyone. These are the folks behind really the game changer, right? And special thanks here to Cisco Vicente from the FDA, who's been a partner with us, and of course Jason Spiegler, who really started driving this with the entire team. Am I hearing myself echo here? No, I'm okay. All right. And again, many of you are going to ask, when is it going to be released, right? I won't speak from my from my little office here. I want everyone to read it and go to that link and find out, and you get the information. Initially, the guidance was called for computer software assurance for non-product software. Look at the name, computer software assurance for manufacturing, operations, and quality system software. So I'll leave it up to you to really decipher what this means, okay? It is on list A, and it's a prioritized guidance that CDRH intend to publish the end of fiscal year 2020, which we're hoping September 2020. But that date is not confirmed, and we don't know. All right. What I'm presenting here, just additional information I want for those of you who have not been following us, is to really look at these links, click on these links, and watch these webinar with Cisco and others, and other folks from the FICSA team. We kicked off that webinar series back in April 23rd. Stephen and I and Cisco, we started it. And then compliance group have put out a white paper to help you really navigate through CSA. And then finally, here is a list, and I'll keep that list compiled every time we have a recording. You can just click on that and watch the recording. Cultural barrier. Well, I'm sure you're probably tired of my voice right now, so I'm going to pass it on to my buddy, Stephen Cook, because he's very passionate about these things, and you're going to hear it in his voice. Stephen.
Yeah, and I want to make a comment on everyone's question about when is that guidance releasing. If you simply look at the change in title, guys, they're trying to make this as inclusive and all-encompassing as possible. So while everyone's wondering, this has been written, we've been talking about it for years, why is it not out there? That's literally because this is what's going on. How widespread can we make CSA? All right, if you want to go on to the pain points.
Coming right up. Oh, no. Sorry. Go ahead.
So done validation a lot of years, as has April and Khaled, and I'm going to ask them to back me up on these.
Yeah.
First one there is, we validate everything. Everything's high risk, but some things are even more high risk, so we do extra testing on those, right? There's no concept really in what we've been doing for years of, do I really need to test this? Should I be more worried about the quality? I have spoken with product software people, literally yelling at me in the face, you do more testing on computer systems than we do on products. And sadly, they're often right. Too much documentation, right? It's all about the game. The auditor comes on site and they ask for a validation. I'm going to roll in 4 carts full of binders and tell them to figure it out, right? We've got so much documentation. Look at what we did. So we write all these issue reports, deviations, defects, whatever you guys call them, 2 in the morning. 80% of them that I've written were because it was a cut and paste error on a test case. Waste of time. Everybody says CSV, it's the longest part of the process. You guys add the most cost. If you guys work in validation, do we get blamed for a lot? Data mining. We purchased an inexpensive system, but we never implement it because it's going to cost too much to validate it. And then we have to maintain it over its entire life cycle and every change and update all the documentations. And it's just not practical to maintain. So a lot of us are what we call our hybrid systems. We do our requirements documents in a document management system, but everything else is on paper. So it's a painful process, and we've all been feeling it for years. We've all made a lot of assumptions that this is what you're supposed to do because, well, that's what somebody told me you're supposed to do. April, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is, well, that's what gets me out of audit issues. They ask these questions, they might be pulling on that thread that I didn't answer right, so then it just goes in and we just add the burden to ourselves, right? In areas that we probably didn't have to. But going back to your point, we validate like it is a product, right? And it's killing us. And it's not fair, but it's, combination of either it's paper, automated, or it's the resources you have, the human element, right? You have certain skilled resources and this is how they were trained to do it. Therefore, we do it that way. So totally hear you on all these points. Felt it.
When I started in this industry way back, I remember being told by a quality manager at the time, this is your job. 40% of the time you'll document what you're going to do. 40% of the time you're going to document what you did. And 20% of your time you'll actually do something useful.
Yeah. The
Next
value
slide.
All right, sounds good. So I think maybe April can really summarize for us the impact on and all these barriers. I mean, one thing that I'm looking at is it took 4 times longer for CSV than the actual analysis. Just how painful that is. So April, just if you can summarize for us, please, the impact and what is it really causing?
Yep. Well, so think about the example of, I'll pick on our learning management system. It's a traumatic, it's highly audited all the time in audits, and you want to do it right. But with such an implementation, when you try to put it out to, and I'll pick on our company because, right, we grew significantly with the Covidian acquisition, so you have that many more employees, you want it to go right. Well, when you spend so much time on I'll call it the off-the-shelf items that are low risk versus here's the very critical high risk items that I should have spent all my time on, then we missed the boat on some items, right? At first, we had to fix it, but it made for a very stressful implementation. And so the 4 times longer, we killed ourselves because it's such a significant implementation and audited system. And we maybe not spent the right amount of time on those critical pieces versus equal amounts on everything, right? You can't do that. That's just the worst use of your resources time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that, April. What I really want to kind of move to now is I want to get kind of into the topic that eventually April is going to talk about, but we're just going to open up a little bit and show some example that I know is near dear to Stephen's heart: risk analysis, risk management, FMEA, the pain behind it, the pain behind the paper. So I just want between really Stephen and April to really draw this picture, right? And just tell us a little bit and walk us through, it starts with risk. If you're gonna, everything is high, well, guess what?
Yeah.
You're stuck in that, right? So I would like, Stephen, just if you want to kick it off a little bit, and please hand it over to April.
So if you're a validation analyst watching this right now, you're going, is that my desk? Wait, is it? Because we all know it, right? It's drowning in paper.
That's actually I think.
Yeah, and actually it's not bad, right?
Right.
That is actual stack of validation documents from one of our clients, and it was all stuff that needed to be scanned in, original signatures brought together, just mountains of paper. By the way, that client, I don't think you ever saw it, Kyle. It had 4 filing cabinets like that too that had to be that we had to go through. So when we're on the paper, these 100% paper processes, we have to bring them all together. We do all that pagination, we scanning, the signatures, the emailing them around. There's no traceability. So I've done countless traceability matrices. I always say that it ends up more of an art than a science. You're down at the end of the process and you're doing keyword searches and you're like, wait, both of these requirements have the word "the" in it. I'm going to match them together. So when you're doing it on paper, traceability is a pain. When you're doing it on paper, there's no reusability artifacts. I may remember that I wrote a similar test case, but I don't know what April wrote. I don't know what's sitting on her directory, what she wrote. So there's no real reusability. There's no concept of things being unique. No visibility to other validations. I know what I've done. I know what documents I've written. I may pull them around. I may pull them out, revise them, and convert them into the next system. But April may be working on something and doing a great job in it, and I can leverage some of her work, but I don't know. All of the document review cycles, we route for review often in emails. Sometimes we have a document management system. We're signing things out. Certainly test scripts, guys, almost all of us, we're signing those on paper. We are routing a paper-based form around and getting signatures. And now during COVID, we're scanning that entire thing in, sending it to someone, getting a signature, sending it back, and ultimately uploading it into a document management system. The defect and test management, guys, I had a physical logbook. Like I had a leather-bound logbook where you wrote manually the defect number and the system that it was associated with. Right? It's madness. It's 2020, and I'm sure some of you are seeing the same thing. So defect management exists in this silo. We write the report, we tie the defects to the report, but there's really no trending across systems because you don't have that visibility. Change control. Again, I had a paper-based logbook, bound. We ordered it every year, and the only way I knew when things were due is once a month, I'd go through that logbook and I'd look at the date it was initiated to follow up because we had a 90-day rule that change controls had to be closed or addressed within 90 days. So total paper process, totally manual. And there's no intelligence on the type of changes. Everything's one-off, everything's custom. April?
Yeah. No, I mean, and even worse than that is when you have the combination, like in our company, where you have some teams doing paper-based, some doing automated, and trying to marry the two up in skill sets. I mean, it just adds to the complexity, right? Because when you're a central, process and you're saying, here's what you do, you have to have all the variability accounted for with either paper-based or automated-based. So that is a high challenge too, in addition to this.
And I think there's a risk really associated with that as well, from because the entire industry is always afraid from auditors and inspectors. Well, you're really given reasons for the inspectors now, because when they go from one site to another, well, how come that site has that and you don't?
Exactly. It's like you're Medtronic, as an example. You should be about the same, they expect about the same at any given site, and it is going to be widely different based on how you grew up, what that site is like, what skills you have there, and their model. So you want as best you can to get away from paper, get away from so many different variables when they come to audit you. Agree.
Absolutely. All right, Stephen, risk assessment. Again, I want you to speak a little bit about it, but I would like April to speak a little bit more about it. So go ahead.
So I would imagine most of you are doing this today, the FMEA-based risk assessment. I'm going to be honest, when I used to have meetings for these, I dreaded these things so much, I would literally consider calling in sick that day. And then I was like, oh God, I can't, I'm the quality person on it, I can't, oh God, oh God. So, these things are great for product, guys. The fact that we've applied this to our computer systems, why? Well, because we were supposed to, right? Big Brother's watching. FDA is going to expect to see it. They're going to look for an FMEA. No, they're not. So, we go through this whole, what's the requirement? And let me start on that. First of all, you got those first two columns, the requirement number, and then what is the requirement? So you've got this shadow traceability matrix, and yet you've got a requirements document. But if you update that, you're going to have to update your traceability matrix too, because you copied the same information in both places, right? Whew. What's my failure mode? A lot of times we are pulling this out of thin air. What's my, I don't know, somebody in Japan clicks on save at the same time, and I don't know, right? Or worse, people write it just in the negative. This system does not, and that's my failure mode. And then you get into severity, totally subjective, low, medium, or high. What's medium to me may be low to you. What's high to me may be low to you. The rationale for the severity, I almost always see this be like, we won't meet a compliance requirement, right? That's my rationale. That's why it's severe. Probability, rating, detectability, priority. But there's so much subjectivity in this process. And then this is supposed to drive your testing, right? What are my measures and mitigations of it? Guys, stop your FMEA risk assessment for computer software validation. It's unnecessary. When Khaled asked me to take this process, when he and I worked at another company together, I did the analysis that the typical FMEA risk assessment, by the time you got it approved, the number of people you had in a room on 100 requirements, I did it for 100 requirements, was a $40,000 document to put together. And I literally felt like it added no value. It was a checkbox. Yep, we did the risk assessment.
Yep.
April?
Yeah, no, I mean, same here. It's like when you think about it in the context of the cost, the time, and how it's leveraged, you're spot on. It's like, think about, how many people are in the room with you, building that document, getting it to the end goal. Did they even leverage it? There's huge opportunities to leverage the risk, right, as we're learning through this group, which is awesome. But they didn't take it that next step further to do anything different in the testing phase. It's like, oh, yep, still, everything's going to be tested full on. Yep. So you did all this work, and I'm not doing anything different at the end of the day. Yeah, completely agree.
Just a funny story on that. Where I was before, it became so automated that we had a list of failure modes with numbers, and then we had a list of mitigations with numbers, and we got to the point where we were going across and saying, okay, that requirement 1, 4, 9, 7, mitigations 3, 9, 11, 14, right? I mean, it was just, Yep. All right, so Khaled, if you're not doing an FMEA, what are you going to do? You're going to do a CSA risk assessment. And I'm going to ask you to go back and forth here, Khaled. But the first one, 106, can you go back to the prior? Can we look at that?
Oh, really? You're going to do this to me now? Okay.
Okay. So the system shall allow for role-based security with a complaint owner, a complaint investigator, and a complaint approver. All right, go forward. All right, so security, does that have impact on patient, product, and data integrity? You could argue indirect. I think more none. What's the complexity of that requirement? This particular one happened to be out of the box. That maps to a test assurance rating of 1. And in this one, I'm saying, you know what, this product it's widespread use. And that's what I'm going to run rather than doing testing. Let's look at another one. Let's look at the next one. If you go back to 1919. Okay.
We're just going to do one more and that's it.
Yeah. So this one, the system shall automatically adjust extrusion tension based on tubing wall thickness monitoring during the manufacturing process. So here you have manufacturing, you have a machine-based decision adjusting product quality. So let's go back down. I have direct impact. When I start talking about patient product data integrity, I have a requirement that has direct impact. And this requirement, it's an interface because I've built a custom function that communicates back from my monitoring to my PLC to adjust that extrusion tension. So I am in my highest risk rating of a 5, which means I'm going to do robust scripted, including positive and negative testing. And all I really want to show you here, guys, is you're approaching risk from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And how long do you think this risk takes versus the FMEA risk? And which one do you honestly think adds more value?
And if you go back to the last slide, sorry, Khalid,
Sure.
if you look just in these 5 examples, and this is pretty reflective in general, it's about the 20–30% are going to end up in your normal to high risk type of testing where you really want to focus, and that's where you're partnering with your business to put the emphasis on. But then there's the other 60, 70% that it's out of the box. You could get away with doing smoke testing, leveraging the vendor. It's wide use in the industry, so you can leverage their IQ/OQs. But we really want to emphasize here that you just have to do that upfront analysis with it's a simpler way than if you're on a product side, but it's helping you to put the right amount of effort into those key things that are going to matter to your business. And on the other things, it's like, you know what, we spent, just this much time, everything looked good when we installed it. Nothing's really going to, impact you for those low risk areas.
Absolutely. So, and I know we're talking now, it's still to me more of a manual process, right? And how you're doing your assessment. We heard Stephen talking about here's your user requirement, here's your mapping it, and you're duplicating effort, right? And I'm gonna skip some of that because I really want to get to April's case study on how they went from that manual work that we've been talking about, right? And how they actually get to what they're doing today, and also the value that they've added ever since. And if you can just walk us through, April, how did it all start, from a CSA perspective, from a challenge that you received within your organization, and how you really jumped into not just CSA, but you went into automating your CSA, basically.
Yeah, sounds good. And stop me, if you have some questions along the way too. But we were to begin with, as I kind of shared our journey, when we first started to look at what we were doing within just Medtronic, and we had already started kind of down some journey of moving from the paper-based to automated. But then when we grew in size with our acquisition of Covidien, it was a game changer for us because they had some great ideas and tools, Polarion, that married up with when you have such a large IT presence organization, the business really needing us to help, make things efficient for them. COVID, oh my gosh, it's skyrocketing. Hey, we have some need here, and we need you guys to be efficient, but do the right things for us to give us the right technology to help us with our day-to-day jobs. We knew that we needed to bring the two parties together into a common model that would take the varying, I will say, skill sets of IT resources, right? So not all grew up in the product side. You know, some of us, okay, I did, right? You kind of learn that risk-based approach, but not everybody is just in tune understanding that. And if you really want to take advantage of this, and that's why a lot of us joined this team, we heard about an audience with FDA. Hey, they're looking at ways to simplify, truly, you know, set the standard for risk-based, and let's see what we can learn from our industry peers, because we all probably are experiencing the same issues, and we want to take advantage of that. We want to help contribute to that and then take it back in and see what we can do to implement that here at Medtronic. So you're probably familiar with some of the challenges. This slide is really taking the information that Stephen just shared on kind of right-sizing the risk, right? Trying to get to simple terms, simple models of how to assess risk within an automated, you know, application that we use for our business into those different buckets. But to do that, it was really difficult to think of doing that in a paper-based, right? You need kind of that lineage of, and to Stephen's point earlier, if he didn't know what I did for an analysis on a risk, and we don't have that knowledge sharing, and people come and go in IT, because that happens in our industry, right? They just shift around to different resources. Yeah. I don't want that knowledge to, you know, walk out the door. I need something to track that so that the next person who picks it up is like, yep, got it, logic. They documented that this was this risk, and I can see why, and here's the type of testing I'm going to do. So this one is sharing that we made a conscious choice as a company that we did want to move to make this more automated, to make it less error prone, especially as we ramp up and ramp down resources within our IT organization. What can we do to make it simple for them to know what's the right checks and balances and things to do to automate or to validate a system? And so we found that Polarion was kind of the nice advantage there, where it combined some of our typical PLM, you know, ALM systems, the right checks and balances for approvals, but it allowed for both, I will say, waterfall, agile teams, because they, you know, we have the mix of both, and they're very in tune with some of those common tools out there. I'll even poke on some that we have in-house still, but it was nice that it was a full circle solution that we could also integrate very easily with our change management systems, kind of like what Stephen was talking about. You need that good change records of, you know, when you're making changes to your systems too, and it ties nicely with that. So, but going on from this, what did we want to try to solve? These are some of the common pain points, and these are what I consider the low-hanging fruit, but the ones that we keep getting dinged on in audits. It's like, what can we do to solve these simple problems so we can, you know, focus our time, our expertise, our talent pool on doing a better job of implementing solutions with that risk-based approach. So some of the simple things that we implemented with Polarion, you might have run into this, and I'm just going to only, you know, pick on a few here, but certainly you can see the numerous items that you've probably experienced. Missing quality deliverables. I have a new IT person. They're not accustomed to validation. They had their training. They didn't realize they needed to do a maintenance validation plan. Hey, this is a low risk change. I don't have to do that documentation. No, I just need to do it when there's a major release. Well, we would run into issues like, sorry, we're missing some deliverables. not the case. You know, when you build in a workflow here where it says answer a few questions, it'll kind of spit out, yep, here's the few deliverables you need to do, right? Try to remove some of that guesswork with your pool of resources. Some of the other major ones that were painful was, do we have the people trained before they actually do the job, right? You're getting on resources pretty quickly. You want to make sure everything's moving seamless as you onboard new resources, but you want to make sure they're trained before they actually, you know, write the documents, do the work, get it signed off. Those are some of the, you know, couple items that we would miss from time to time. It's like they completed the training a day after they approved that document. How is that possible? Simple things like that, right? But we really focused on what was that solution we could start to build here as a foundation for everybody to acclimate to and have to onboard into, versus then once you get the noise out of the way, now we're going back and saying, okay, here's how you assess and use that risk-based approach, right? That's kind of the human element. Get them to understand the simple things that they don't want to have to focus on, to be able to get them up to speed on what's raising their skill set into doing the risk-based approach. Next slide.
Awesome. All right, I think
sorry.
I'm going to go to this one because I know the other one was a repeat, so go ahead.
Yep, sounds great. Well, and this is square on with the effort we're doing with the CSA team. Loved it. It's like, hey, we had to work through together as what's that right level and balance. You guys have probably had something like this with the, you know, risk analysis, the color scheme, and, you know, what fits into those risk levels. But then we had to tactically figure out what is it that, what type of requirement and categories make the most sense to then link in the system to the right test script model, if you will, right? You can have templates for test, but I wanted to make sure that here, if I had a requirement and I tagged it that is because of, it did have some sort of impact to the, you know, patient risk and what type of implementation it was, the off the shelf or not, that triggered then automatically in the system. It wasn't a guesswork there, right? Especially if you have resources, you have your people who are writing the requirements, doing that analysis, and the people who are testing, they're not the same people. You want to have that linkage and rationale. And that was our method. So we use this, the risk rating, the assurance activities implemented in the tool to be, you know, matching. And this was phenomenal because it then gave them the option, hey, if this thing is low risk, I can choose it's, you know, spits out the option to do an unscripted. They are not accustomed to that, right? They grew up in maybe having to do everything the same way, but it showed them in the tool the option to have the unscripted type testing, and they started to then adapt. So there's a lot of human element here that you have to account for when you're trying to implement this. I mean, we have right now like 4,000 IT folks. Imagine saying, hey, use this tool, try to figure this out. You don't want to just throw it into their hands. You want to give them the best, you know, options for success. And I have to say, this was the way that we approached it. It may not be, you know, perfect for everybody, and certainly available to, if you have questions on what were some of the pitfalls we ran into, certainly there are some, but you kind of have to make it, and I hate to say this, but you have to make it as easy as possible for the lowest skill set within your organization. And that's the approach that we had to take.
Totally agree. And I think really what I'm also sensing here, so really CSA is not one size fits all, right?
Right.
Depending on your organization. So go ahead if you want to speak to that, because just looking at it, the CSA approach on a risk rating and Medtronic approach. So
yeah, but the Medtronic approach can be done in any scale of company. I say how we approach it because we had such a large scale, but even a, you know, simpler company, lower scale, it still goes back to the Do you want to make this simple? Do you want to make this more common in our industry, that this is kind of the model that makes it efficient for us and to serve our business better? It can happen at all levels of company size.
Absolutely.
It's just whether or not your IT organization is ready for that change, or you have to force the change.
And the tolerance of your quality group, right? How much risk or perceived risk that they're willing to take.
That's right. And you know, what helps to solidify or increase their tolerance is the audit over audit. Hey, you know, what we're showing you here is defendable. It's been working well. It's actually serving your business better. So that's been a great proof testament to the work done here. This one, when we were going through trying to implement, and I'll start talking about this slide, I visually needed to, you know, when you think about implementing in a tool or even paper-based, you kind of need to, in your mind, crystallize what type of risk ratings would you think would fit into these buckets. And so this was our simple way of fitting the different types of risks from the green, yellow, red into a visual that then we use to train our people who write the requirements and our testers, because this to them made sense. You know, we're very visual learners and you have to do that. So this was helpful. I think I would even go as far to say what could be possibilities within the unscripted, you know, the IQ, OQ, that could be an element. Unscripted could be, hey, I had some users, my business users, you know, run some tests, and then I say, you know, what they accepted it or not, you know, all is good there. But there's different elements for training that you're going to want to add to something like this to help onboard your folks.
I love this, by the way. I think this could probably answer a lot of questions that I'm seeing coming in, you know, like, for example, how do you exactly define an ad hoc, unscripted, scripted, and robust testing, right? I mean, this is just aligned with exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you know, I know this is a simple presentation, but we have a little bit more training in the background, because exactly, you know, our testers came right into us going, what the heck? I mean, what am I supposed to do here? I'm only used to, you know, line by line, you know, pass, fail, and evidence. What am I supposed to do here? So it is a mind shift and a additional training to get them comfortable. But it comes, and if you have a good test group that are willing to kind of adapt and learn, you're going to be in much better shape for sure.
So a little bit of critical thinking would help, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. It can't just be, I have one way to do it.
Absolutely. Stephen, do you want to just wrap up a little bit? I know you've got, I call you the risk king, because you've done a lot of these. Do you want to add anything to April?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to this is that, as we've said, there is no one size fits all. Some organizations like the none, low, medium, high. Other organizations find that subjective. Some organizations use none, indirect, direct. So, you know, it's regardless of what model you use, you land in the same 5 levels of testing, first 3 being unscripted, on to the limited scripted and the robust scripted.
Excellent. April, I do have one question, and probably a lot of folks on the phone have it. How did your quality organization, how was the pushback? How did they respond to the idea of CSA? And how did you convince them?
How did we convince them? Yeah, it's kind of like a typical change, change impact training that you get. You know, you're going to have your naysayers, you're going to have your in the middle, you're going to have your sponsors, ones that are all for it. We initially had one naysayer, one, you know, sponsor, like, hey, these are the key influencer doers. They worked on an example in a project of leveraging this. And at the end of the day, they're like, holy cow, this reduced so much work. It was painful at first, you know, to adjust, and now they see the light. And so then we leverage them in our case studies internally at Medtronic, saying, hey, you have questions, or kind of our SMEs, our, you know, change network. You kind of want to build up a couple change network people, kind of who can buy in and go from there. People are the biggest element here and biggest influencers, and can make it successful or can make it die very fast. So
absolutely, yeah, this is a good segue that we're going to have with Lenthius in a couple of weeks, as a matter of fact, talking about cultural organization and how it's like our politics today, right? You just need to bring people in.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, April. Really, for the sake of time and also the questions, I just want to kind of get to the next step and some of the questions that we've been getting. So some of the next steps, again, I mentioned them earlier in our objective. Start thinking how you want to implement CSA, digitize your current paper CSA process. Obviously, we've seen how Medtronic implemented Polarion, and of course, it's not just those 2 slides. I'm sure there's a lot of work behind the scene that had happened. And really, please stop waiting for the draft guidance. And I really want to get your opinion on this, April, and I really wanted to ask that question. Let's say today the FDA says, you know what, we're not releasing this FDA guidance probably in the next 5 years. What would you do? Would you actually revert back to your old CSV process, or you would stay where you are?
No, I mean, we would push on through. We would, I mean, we're already updating. The risk-based approach that we've implemented here is no different than the, you know, 14 guidance, right, on the risk analysis and risk approach. So we're not doing anything that's out of alignment with that, which I think is good, right? We have the FDA, we have our ISO standards. It's still full in alignment, and as long as you're writing your processes to map out what you're doing here, then I think we're in good shape. The guidance is huge for spreading the buy-in awareness within the industry. I think that's why love that we're pushing this through and forward, but I would not take a step back from that, even if that didn't get approved.
Awesome.
And you know,
love it. Awesome.
Anybody ever comes across an auditor that tells you by putting patient safety and product quality at the heart of your risk assessment is wrong, we'd love to hear about it.
I totally agree. Absolutely. And really, this is also kind of a segue here to why ISPE GAMP, and a lot of the folks on the phone, they're probably hearing, so is it just the guidance? Is it just Medtronic doing it? No, there is tons. I know from our perspective, from a consulting firm, we've helped over a dozen already implementing it. And I know Medtronic implemented in their own. Many large companies, Fresenius, Medtronic, and so forth, they've all implemented it because it is within the current regulation.
Yeah. Both paper and automated basis, I will say too, right? Because I mean, it's not that you can't do this in a paper-based. You know, you can. You know, so we have both scenarios and case studies.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Really, what I'm showing here is basically just our next webinar with Lenthius, and I know we talked about organizational cultural change. It will be interesting. Actually, April, if you're interested, would love to have you with Lou. I know you guys worked together before.
Yes,
all right.
Love to. He's a great guy.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna head to questions. Would you like to say anything else before we jump into questions, or we're good? So one of the questions that I'm looking at, GAMP 5 suggests calculation of the residual risk after risk mitigations applied. What happens to residual risk with CSA?
So, you know, typically whenever we did the risk assessment and you're defining out your mitigations, and you can still put in, you can see an example when you guys get this deck. On a 4 or a 5, meaning you're at the far end of that risk scale, I suggest you add mitigations. So yes, GAMP 5 talks about addressing residual risk. You can update your document, or you can assume your mitigation works, and if it doesn't, then come back to update the document. I choose the latter. I choose to define my mitigation out, verify that mitigation works, and if it doesn't, no, I need to come back and readdress it.
Yeah, I
Totally
agree.
agree.
Yep, because there you always have input mechanisms, right? Feedback loops.
Yep.
And like in IT, right? You have your incidents, you have your customer base that says, hey, I'm still experiencing this, and you know, follow through as Stephen said, okay, well then maybe I need to mitigate this a little bit further.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, where can I get test templates for ad hoc exploratory testing? Maybe April, hey, maybe you and I will get into some business here. We'll divide and conquer. I'll create some templates you create and we'll sell them on eBay. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, April, if you want to answer some of that and how you did your template and what did you base it on?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we created a template that we felt was audit friendly and measured effectively at that level. But we use Polarion, so you know it's a template, and Polarion's great at that. You can right size different templates. Maybe it's something that we should take offline here, Khalid, to build in as part of some of our white paper, not the white paper, but some of the examples presentations for a later date. It's something, I doubt it's super confidential. I'll check, but it's a very simple approach. But it leverages some of the capabilities within the tool too.
And guys, there's various flavors of unscripted, right? Unscripted could be anywhere from just a description of what you're going to test as an objective, and then it's all free form. It can be functional certification where you're just writing down the requirement and then verifying it. It can be a few high-level steps. It can be a process you're trying to break, but there is no, single unscripted test template.
And I think what was key for us was just making sure that we identified that in our test processes as an acceptable approach, right? Here's the model and it works quite effectively. An attachment, because we're in an automated system. Hey, I want to attach an IQ, PQ. Great. Here's some evidence that justify that I think this is acceptable, right? Things like that too.
Thank you. One more question is coming up here. How do we exactly define ad hoc, unscripted, scripted, and robust testing?
You want to go back to the April slide that shows the risk tables? So you've got 5 different levels of testing, and April, I'm going to ask you to describe how you guys go from low or none to high, but you've got 5 different levels of testing here. And those testings levels are based on what's your potential to do harm to patient safety or product quality, and then how is that requirement achieved? Is it out of the box? Is it configured, or is it something you've custom developed? So that 1 through 3, that's your unscripted. 4 and 5, 4 is your limited, 5 is your robust and kind of traditional positive negative. In terms of how you assess that none through high, April?
Which one? Sorry, the none.
When you're looking at patient safety, product quality, how are you making the assessment from none, low, medium, high?
So that within our requirements is a requirement by requirement basis. It's not even by groupings of requirements. Each requirement has 2 taggings. One is for the category of the business analyst who does the requirements on the probability, right? So, and then the out of the box or the type of implementation. So there's 2 drop downs, they select them, and the logic in there then feeds you into the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 risk. It does a calculation. So that's in the requirement. And when I go to try to create a test script from that requirement or independent and I link it to the requirement, it says, here's a type of test type you can do. It always defaults to the highest level of the one that matches. And if I want to, let's just say it was a low risk or maybe it's a limited and I still want to do a robust, I still make it capable, right, of being able to do a robust, just in case that, hey, I know it says it's low or medium, but I still want to do the normal high level testing, just based on some maybe business side of it, right? Maybe it's not a quality side, but a business side element. But then we have 3 different templates that spawn in our tool to say, here's the 3 you can use. And the robust is defined as the same type that you're likely doing today, step by step, list the steps, you know, put a pass fail for every step, attach evidence, right? You know, and then at the end, sign it off. Who was the tester, and just the normal testing you're probably doing today. You're still doing sign-offs for the limited and unscripted. It's just that what the content is in there, like the limited could be, hey, I'm maybe doing some steps, but maybe I'm doing some attachments of IQ, OQ, or I'm doing some you know, smoke testing, and I'm sharing that as evidence, or my business user gave me some results. Fine, you know, put that in there, sign off as you would normally. The unscripted for sure is as simple as you were saying, Stephen.
And even these unscripted testing, you're still giving it a test script ID. If you use runs, you're giving it a run ID, and you're still tracing that to your requirement. So that's a key factor here, guys. It's still documented, it's still traceable.
But, you know, take into consideration, maybe I have 40 or 50 requirements that are all low, and I want to link them doing some smoke testing, off the shelf, whatever evidence. I link them all to that unscripted test, and that's the clean linkage and evidence that it's been adequately analyzed that requirement all the way down to the type of testing I'm going to do for evidence.
Thank you. By the way, you've answered actually 3 other questions, so thank you. That was awesome. We're getting a strange question from Lou. He's saying, hi, April. You can say hi to him. How is the Polarion tool adoption coming along?
Hey, Lou, it's increasing, thank God. It's coming along. It's, as I was sharing earlier, it's a human element, getting them on board, right? As he experienced firsthand.
Awesome, awesome. Anything you'd like to say to the folks that are either not believing in CSA or they're reluctant to actually go for CSA? 3, should they automate? Should they use a tool like Polarion, and why? So please go ahead. 3 questions. Sorry about that.
That's all right. No, you know, coming from the product side, going into IT, in my work history, I was skeptical about how much work we were doing in IT versus on the product side. And when I joined this team, it was amazing because we're all experiencing the pains, and hearing about the pains and working through some solutions together was phenomenal. So no, I'm not skeptical any longer. I've got to work with some amazing people, Lou on the line, Frankie, everybody on the team's been amazing. So if you want to pick at it, go ahead. Sometimes it's just scared to try something different, but sometimes you're forced to. I mean, we're in a really odd situation with COVID, and this might be your catalyst to try for something change within your audience. So don't be afraid. Love this work and love to contribute to it. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chris, it's all yours.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time today. Continue to stay safe out there from wherever you are in the world. Our next episode is September the 3rd. Hopefully, we'll see you on the next webinar in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.